The Wyoming Territory stretched out like a canvas of God's own making, vast and unforgiving, its plains rolling under a sky so wide it seemed to mock the smallness of human sorrow. The sun hung low, bleeding orange and gold across the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers over 3 fresh graves. Each mound was marked by a crude wooden cross, lashed together with twine, their surfaces still raw from the axe that shaped them. The earth was freshly turned, the scent of damp soil mingling with the crisp bite of autumn grass. Beside the graves knelt Eliza Hawthorne, her hands clawing at the dirt as if she could dig her way back to the lives buried beneath. Her husband, Thomas, her son, Caleb, and her infant daughter, Rosie, all gone, stolen by a fever that had swept through their half-built homestead like a vengeful spirit. Her sobs broke the silence, raw and jagged, each one a wound torn open anew. The prairie swallowed her cries, indifferent as ever, offering no comfort beyond the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. Eliza's dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face, clinging to her tear-streaked cheeks. Her dress, once a soft blue, was stained with dirt and grief, the hem frayed from days of kneeling beside the graves. She was 28, but the weight of loss made her feel ancient, her bones heavy with the kind of sorrow that could crush a soul. She pressed her forehead to the ground, her fingers sinking deeper into the earth, as if she could hold on to Emma Thomas's steady hands, Caleb's bright laughter, Rose's tiny, fluttering breaths. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why them and not me?" The question hung unanswered, lost in the vastness of the plains. She had no kin left, no neighbors for miles. The cabin behind her, half-finished with its gaping roof and skeletal walls, stood as a mockery of the life she dreamed of building here. She was alone, utterly alone, with nothing but the graves and the endless sky. A faint sound broke through her as of the soft snort of a horse, the creak of leather. Eliza's head snapped up, her eyes wild with fear and exhaustion. Through the blur of tears, she saw a figure approaching, a silhouette against the dying light. He was tall, lean, his hat tipped low over his eyes, moving with the easy gait of a man accustomed to long days in the saddle. His horse, a sturdy bay, trailed behind, its hooves muffled on the grass. Eliza scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. Out here, strangers could mean danger of bandits, drifters, men with no regard for a woman alone. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her cheek, and stood her ground, though her knees trembled. The man stopped a respectful distance away, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel underfoot. "You all right?" His words were simple, but they carried a quiet weight, as if he'd seen enough of the world to know when to tread lightly. His face was weathered, etched with lines that spoke of hard years of maybe 35, maybe older. His gray eyes held a steadiness that didn't pry, but didn't look away either. He wore a faded duster coat, its hem dusted with the red dirt of the trail, and a revolver hung low on his hip, its handle worn smooth from use. Eliza's throat tightened. She wanted to scream that she wasn't all right, that nothing would ever be all right again, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, "They're gone, all of them, gone." Her voice broke on the last word, and she sank back to her knees, her hands clutching the earth again. The stranger didn't move closer, didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He just stood there, letting her grief fill the space between them. After a long moment, he crouched down, keeping his distance, his hat casting a shadow over his face. "You got a place to go?" he asked. She shook her head, her eyes fixed on the graves. The cabin behind her was no home, not yet, maybe not ever. Thomas had been the one with the dreams, the one who'd talked of raising cattle, of building a life out here where the land was free and the future theirs to shape. But the fever had come, swift and merciless, and now the cabin was just a shell, like her. "No," she said, barely audible. "There's nowhere." The man stood, brushing dirt from his hat with a calloused hand. "Come on, then," he said. "Can't stay here alone." He turned and started walking toward the cabin, not waiting for her answer, as if he knew she'd follow. Eliza hesitated, her gaze lingering on the graves. The thought of leaving them felt like betrayal, but the cold was creeping in, and the weight of her solitude was heavier than she could bear. She rose, her steps slow and heavy, as if the earth itself tethered her to the graves. She followed the stranger, not because she trusted him, but because she had no other choice. His name was Cole Ramsey, he told her later, as he built a fire in the cabin's makeshift hearth. The structure was little more than 4 walls and a partial roof, the gaps letting in drafts that made the flames flicker. Cole worked with the efficiency of a man who'd spent years fending for himself, stacking what little drywood remained and coaxing a spark from his flint. Eliza sat on a rough bench, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, watching him in silence. He offered her a piece of hardtack and a strip of jerky from his saddlebag, setting them on a tin plate. "Ain't much," he said, "but it'll keep you going." She stared at the food, her stomach twisting. She hadn't eaten properly in days, but the thought of swallowing anything felt like a betrayal to the dead. Still, she took a small bite of the hardtack, its dryness sticking in her throat. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice brittle as the kindling in the fire. Cole leaned back against the wall, his eyes on the flames. "Ain't right, leaving someone to drown in their sorrow," he said simply. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. There was something about him, maybe the way he moved, deliberate and unhurried, or the way he didn't fill the silence with useless chatter, that made her feel he wasn't here to take advantage. Not yet, at least. She'd heard stories of men on the frontier, men who saw a lone woman as prey. But Cole's gaze held no hunger, only a quiet watchfulness, like he was waiting for her to decide what came next. The night deepened, the fire casting shadows on the unfinished walls. Eliza's eyes grew heavy, but sleep felt like a luxury she didn't deserve. Cole stayed near the door, his bedroll spread out on the floor, his hat tipped over his face. "Get some rest," he said, not looking at her. "I'll be here." It wasn't a promise, not exactly, but it was enough to let her close her eyes, if only for a few hours. Morning came with a chill that seeped through the cabin's gaps. Eliza woke to find Cole already up, boiling coffee over the fire. The smell was sharp, grounding, a reminder of days when Thomas would make coffee and tease her about her weak stomach for it. The memory stung, and she pushed it away, focusing instead on the man before her. Cole handed her a tin mug, the coffee black and bitter. "Got plans for today?" he asked, his tone casual, as if they were old friends sharing a morning. Eliza's fingers tightened around the mug. "Bury myself with them," she said, half joking, half serious. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she braced for pity or judgment. But Cole just nodded, like he'd heard worse. "Reckon you could," he said, "but that ain't what they'd want." He sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the cabin. "This place needs work. Roof's half gone, walls need chinking." "You planning to stay?" She hadn't thought that far. The future was a fog, thick and impenetrable. "I don't know," she admitted. This was Thomas's dream, not mine. Just a broken bar followed him. Cole set his mug down, his movements slow, deliberate. "Dreams don't die with the dreamer," he said. "Not if you hold on to 'em." He stood, brushing his hands on his trousers. "I'll start on the roof. Got some tools in my pack. You want to help, you're welcome. If not, that's fine too." Eliza watched him step outside, his figure swallowed by the morning light. She didn't move, not at first. The graves called to her, their pull stronger than the cabin's promise of shelter. But something in Cole's words, a simple, unadorned, stuck with her. She set the mug down and followed him. The days blurred together, each one marked by the rhythm of work. Cole was a man of few words, but his hands spoke volumes. He felled trees from a nearby stand of pines, dragging logs back to the homestead with his horse. He notched them with the practiced hand, fitting them into the cabin's frame to complete the roof. Eliza watched, sometimes helping, sometimes just sitting by the graves, her fingers tracing the names she'd carved into the crosses. Thomas, Caleb, Rose. She told Cole about them, bit by bit, as the work went on. Thomas's stubborn optimism, how he'd sing off-key to make her laugh. Caleb's love for whittling, his small hands crafting crude animals from scraps of wood. Rose's tiny fingers, curling around her own in the brief months she'd lived. Cole listened, never interrupting, his gray eyes steady, absorbing her words like the earth soaked up rain. He didn't talk much about himself, but Eliza pieced together fragments. He'd been a soldier once, though he didn't say which war. He'd driven cattle across Texas, dodged rustlers in Montana, lost a brother to a saloon fight in Kansas. His past was a map of scars, some visible on his hands, others hidden deeper. "Ain't much for settling down," he said one evening, as they sat by the fire. "But I ain't one for leaving things half done either." The cabin took shape under his hands. He sealed the walls with mud and moss, built a proper chimney from river stones, and dug out the well until it ran clear. Eliza found herself joining him more often, her grief still heavy but no longer paralyzing. She hauled water, held planks steady, learned to swing a hammer without bruising her thumb. Cole taught her practical things: how to check a horse's hooves, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to fire his old Winchester without flinching at the recoil. In return, she taught him to mend a torn shirt, to bake cornbread that didn't taste like sawdust, to laugh at small things again, like the way his horse snorted at a butterfly. They weren't lovers, not even close. Grief was still Eliza's shadow, and Cole seemed to carry his own ghosts, though he never named them. But they were no longer strangers. There was a rhythm to their days, a quiet understanding that grew in the spaces between words. One afternoon, as they sat on the newly built porch, sharing a meal of rabbit stew, Eliza looked out at the graves. She'd planted wildflowers around Thimalu pine and Indian paintbrush, the colors defiant against the gray earth. "I thought I'd be alone forever," she said, her voice soft but steady. Cole followed her gaze, his hands resting on his knees. "You ain't alone, Eliza," he said. "Not while I'm here." He didn't look at her, but his words carried a weight that settled deep in her chest. The cabin behind them was no longer a chalet. It was solid, warm, filled with the smell of fresh timber and the promise of permanence. It wasn't just a house, it was a defiance against the emptiness that had threatened to swallow her. Cole had built her a home, not just with logs and nails, but with time, with patience, with the quiet strength of his presence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and shadow, Eliza felt something shift inside her. It wasn't happiness and not yet, but it was something close to hope. The graves would always be there, a reminder of what she'd lost. But the cabin, the wildflowers, the man sitting beside her, they were proof that she could build something new. She wasn't alone, and for the first time in months, that truth felt like enough.